Hello my friends, welcome to another episode of Game Testing Unlimited. My name is Wilfred. How time flies is an understatement. A little over 11 years ago, I have participated in the Diablo 3 beta. Last weekend, I played the open beta early access. I would like to share with you my afterthought. The beta weekend has its ups and downs, and I'll address my concern first and end this on a good note with things I like. If I were to compare D3 and D4 beta experiences, I would say D3 beta was more polished and it ended with little difficulties in taking down Butcher in Act 1. I bet a lot of you had a very positive experience with D3 beta, and that could explain the commercial success of its launch. D3 beta had demonstrated a huge step forward from D2, not only graphically speaking but also combat-wise, how we interacted with the environment, and the solid storytelling with iconic characters we cared about. D4 beta shows us another step forward from D3, but it is more like a refinement of what we have today, and I will go over the key points in just a moment. D4 beta probably has left us with more question and concern on one hand, and perhaps the anticipation how well it may turn out on the other hand. Some of you may take a more wait-and-see approach. Some of you may be very excited about the upcoming June 6 release. For those who have pre-purchased the game and joined the open beta early access, you may have encountered a long queuing time and felt frustrated. But that is the least of my concern, because I'm sure Blizzard will iron that out. My main concern is latency and internet service provider specific issues one may face. Over the beta weekend, I was at my friend's place wanting to play Diablo 4, and my friend is using Singtel, the major service provider here in Singapore. The latency was so bad that it was unplayable. At my home, when using ViewQuest as the ISP, the gameplay was smooth. Some friends of mine who had encountered the same issue had to use mobile data to play the game. This is one area of concern, of course, because it is not that easy to switch an ISP just to play an online game. Even when the game is playable, I am experiencing stuttering and rubber banding. D4 doesn't play as smoothly as D3. I don't think this is a frame rate issue. My frame rate fluctuates, but most of the time it is above 60. I'm using a gaming laptop with 3070 graphic card. I reckon the stuttering was due to latency spike, as I sometimes saw latency changes from 100 to more than 1000 and back to 100 in a short duration. Right now, when I play D3, I'm using the Australian gateway for more consistent latency. I'm not sure if D4 has a similar setup. Also, I won't be surprised if D4 will have a weekly server maintenance, one of the very few ARPG that still use such a dated technology. One major difference between D3 and D4 is that D4 has an open world concept. The map is huge. D4 plays like a proper RPG. Actually, the scale of D4 open world reminds me of Green Dawn. However, I must say D4 open world feels a little bit empty. The environment looks rather generic and the mobs groups are far and spread out. It reminds me of Wilson early access, which isn't necessarily a good thing. For those who are used to World of Warcraft, to see D4 turn somewhat into an MMO could be a welcoming change. And for those who play exclusively the Diablo franchise and prefer to play alone, you may feel the opposite. As a fan of Marvel heroes, I think an MMO ARPG when done right can be really fun. For our Marvel heroes, the story maps were not that huge. It was easy to encounter other players to complete the story objectives. There were special instances of dungeons that encourages MMO play. World bosses were spawned very often with map markers to draw people onto the same hot zones. In contrast to what I see in D4, D4 is a half-hearted approach to MMO. I doubt players would purposely stay on one open world zone just to farm events like back in Marvel Heroes days. At least I don't see that happening during open beta. D4 sees a return to the concept of skill tree, very much like the Dragonflight expansion of World of Warcraft. The skill tree seems pretty linear, with main skill that can be unlocked through main nodes augmented by another fixed node and another node that you can choose between two options. That to me is a step down from D3 rune concept, whereby we can have more than one variant for the same skill picked. D4 skill tree allows us to make one skill more powerful than other by investing more points in it. Also, we can pick certain passive nodes with trade-off against active skills. That is probably one of the minor improvements over D3. My D4 sorcerer plays similarly to my D3 wizard, which I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I teleport, I use hydras, and there is an armor skill. I have one basic skill to generate mana, and I use meteor. D4 is indeed a D3 upgrade, nothing evolutionary. But having said that, I do look forward to playing druid. I'm hoping that D4 doesn't box me into a particular build like D3 does with set bonuses, and endgame itemization would open up more build options, especially for those who are not chasing the S tier builds like myself. Respect now costs gold. It doesn't come free like D3 or WoW. Only time will tell if it is as nominal as Grim Dawn or as expensive as Path of Exile. I am for the freedom to experiment and not to rely on cookie cutter builds. I think Warhammer 40,000 Inquisitor has the best balance on respect. It only requires you to spend time playing the game, and you can earn one respect token every hour. So, what does that mean now that D4 respect requires gold? It will limit the freedom of build experimentation, but that would mean nothing if there aren't enough viable builds like Warhammer. Take D3 as an example. We are free to change our builds, but most would follow a cookie cutter build at endgame, and we can count the number of viable builds per class with less than 10 fingers. By the look of it, we will not be able to switch between speed farming build versus hard content push build like Diablo 3 through Armory. At the end game, we would likely stick with what we have in D4. Again, my speculation, only time will tell. I must admit, the story of D4 hasn't quite grown on me as D3 did. Leah, Darkercane, and Tyrael, characters of D3 Act 1, instantly hooked me in. I genuinely wanted to help Darkercane, care for Leah, and be curious about Tyrael. For D4, we have Lilith and Inarius and their firstborn Rathma. The story doesn't have that hook effect like D3. I must say, as the story unfolds, I wish D4 offered me the option for an alliance with Lilith or Inarius, very much like how Horde Alliance worked in World of Warcraft, and let my action changes the course of the story. I haven't seen the rest of the story. I highly doubt my wish will be granted. Without a doubt, D4 graphic looks awesome compared to D3. After all, they are 11 years apart. I wouldn't say though D4 graphics are ahead of modern day ARPG, but I welcome the upgrade. It is hard to tell what the game pace would be by looking at the open beta. My gut feeling tells me that the D4 game pace is slower than D3 and other popular ARPG. The first 20 level feels slow playing at veteran difficulties, one above the easiest option. The gear often drop at 10 level below my character and don't seem to make my character much stronger relative to the difficulty level. D4 is more difficult than D3, and this manifested in boss fights. I enjoy the multi-stage boss fight, though I think it's a little bit too difficult and a little bit too unfair to melee classes like Barbarian. I played the Sorcerer, and like the early days of D3, it is back to kiting and passive damage. I wouldn't want to stop and deal active damage. My character would be dead by then. Unique to D4 and common to other ARPG, there is an ability to actively dodge or evade an incoming attack on top of other movement skill you may have. This soul-like gameplay may take a little bit of getting used to, but I think it's good in the long run. I also like the active use of Hell Globes. Unlike D3 whereby health globes are automatically used to replenish health even at full health. In D4 you have a limited time to decide if you should use a health globe to refill your potion. On difficult encounters, I would want to pace out the consumption of time limit health globe with my potion usage. There is a bit of risk and return, I like it. What I don't like is to get one shot or two shot by a boss spawn that I could do nothing against it. D4 can be frustrating. Again, that reminds me of Wolfson, and I sincerely hope that D4 will not turn into another Wolfson. In conclusion, I don't regret pre-purchasing the game, though it is one really expensive game. By the look of it, given what I see on the scale of the beta, I would most likely have a good time completing the story and the side quest. Will I play D4 as much as I do with D3? Only time will tell. Thanks for tuning in. I will make more D4 video when the game officially launches this year, June 6th. I'll see you in hell or heaven or wherever D4 story will bring. Ciao.